are we here? This is going to be pretty apparent for most of you, but just in case it needs clarifying, our police are out of control. And that's really why we're here. Everybody on this screen is somebody who since 2019 is the oldest incident here, has been a victim of racist policing. I wanted to kind of talk about some of these people in case you don't know who some of them are, because there's a good chance you don't know who any of them are, honestly. But of course we know Elijah McClain up here, near the top left. He was murdered by Aurora police in 2019. These two young children on the ends here are Torrance McCall and Elias Armstrong. He was 16, he was 12 when they died. They're brothers. Their father was beaten into a coma by Denver police about 15 years ago. And then Torrance was involved in a chase with Westminster police. There were several other people in his car. When the police arrived, they found that Torrance had been shot in the back of the head and concluded that he killed himself with no further investigation of any sort. Elias Armstrong, a white vigilante named Jack Reed had his car stolen. He went to the police and he told them, I'm going to find who stole my car, I'm going to kill them. And he did. He hunted that car from Central Park all the way to Sun Valley, and when he found it, he found 12-year-old Elias Armstrong inside and killed him. Shame indeed. District Attorney Beth McCann refused to charge Jack Reed with any crime. She said he was defending himself against his 12-year-old child. That same DA McCann, though, pressed first-degree murder charges on Stephon Long when he was attacked by white vigilantes on the highway and survived an attempted lynching by legally defending himself with the firearm that he purchased. He was charged with first-degree murder, and luckily, thank goodness, through community power by coming together, some great works by some great organizations. I want to shout out Denver Justice Project and Alex Landau especially. Stephon Long's a free man today. He has had all of his charges dropped. That's like 2 weeks ago, I think. So we got a victory there. But in the case of Elijah McClain, there's a big issue here in Aurora. We see a pattern in Aurora. Because this also happened, District 1 Police in Aurora. This is Jordell Richardson. He was 14 years old when Aurora police pinned him down in an alley and shot him behind the dumpster. That was last summer. Nobody was held accountable for that. In that same Aurora Police District 1, just this May, killed Kylan Lewis. He had his hands in the air with a cell phone in his hands. And they'd been tailing him for 2 days. They knew he was no danger, but they moved in as a SWAT team with assault rifles. One officer fired one shot. It's been about 120 days now, and nobody's been held accountable for this. Shame. So I just wanted to make it really apparent. These are all very recent instances, but this has been going on for a long time. The police are out of control. There's no other way to describe it. If we had our way, it wouldn't look like this. If this was genuinely democratic, it wouldn't look like this. I forgot to mention Adam Fresquez. He was killed by a white vigilante while charging his electric vehicle. And they shot him twice in the back, left him to bleed out in the parking lot. First call the killer made was to his attorney before he turned himself into the police, who pressed no charges. So we at DACAC, we think communities should have control over how they're policed, and this is not a new idea. This is actually a really old idea that's rooted in the national liberation struggles of multiple people in this country. It got started in the late 60s and early 70s by the Black Panthers. You can see here they had a conference for community control of the police in 1973. This was just a little bit after the assassination of Fred Hampton. This is a really long time demand here. This was part of their 10-point program. So the Black Panthers had a 10-point program. I don't know if you know this. Their 10-point program called for the community control of all public institutions, and they identified that the primary public institution that they really needed to go after first was policing. Because policing is the #1 ways that Black and brown communities are terrorized and oppressed. It's really the lever of that oppression there. This call for community control of institutions was then echoed by the Plan Espiritual de Atzalan, which was made right here in Denver by the Chicano movement. So it's not just in the Black liberation struggle. This is something you saw reappear in the Chicano liberation struggle, in the Indigenous American liberation struggle. But around this same time, there was a coalition forming, the Coalition to Free Angela Davis and All Political Prisoners. And out of that coalition came an organization called the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, which sort of ended up at the intersection of these places, community control and freedom for political prisoners. And that organization was able to free a man from jail named Frank Chapman, who was in prison for a murder he didn't commit. And that man, Frank Chapman, dedicated his life to this movement, and to this day, he is the leader of the National Alliance that we're a part of. And he also leads the Chicago chapter. That was just a water bottle, don't worry about it. So that's kind of the history of community control as a demand. NARPR was around for a lot of the 70s, it sort of fell out, and then in 2019, it reestablished itself. And it was perfect timing. It reestablished itself in Chicago and a handful of other cities around the Midwest. And you notice, I don't think it was an accident that it was in the Midwest, particularly in Minneapolis, that this most recent uprising against police violence started. If you look in all of these places where there were massive demonstrations following George Floyd's murder, what you'll find is that they were all led by NARPR chapters fighting for community control of the police, fighting for CPAC. This organization was happening on the ground before that murder occurred, and it was because of that organizing on the ground that they were able to mobilize so strongly when that murder occurred. And so it was in studying these movements in the Midwest and how they got to be what they were that we decided we wanted to bring that model here. Obviously it's working, obviously it's doing something. Nobody's responded to a police murder like they responded to George Floyd, and I don't think it's just a fluke that we have to wait for the next one to find. I think that was organizational, there was a reason for that. And so we looked at Chicago, we looked at Minneapolis, and we found this common thread, and we said that's what we need to bring right here to Denver, because this was probably one of the largest, most militant George Floyd protests that wasn't led by NARPR, that wasn't making community controls a demand. And I really would like to know what we could accomplish if we were organized in that fashion, organized in the same way that they had been in Minneapolis and Chicago. So that's what we're trying to do here today. So when they refounded in 2019, their main demand was still community control of the police, but they came back with it way more concrete than they'd ever come back with it before, through the demand of a Civilian Police Accountability Council. What is a Civilian Police Accountability Council? First of all, it's democratically elected. Pretty much nowhere in the country do you have democratically elected officials with real say over the police. So they're democratically elected at the police district level. So does everybody in here know what police district you're in? What police district you live in?
District 1.
Yeah?
2?
In Denver or Aurora?
Aurora.
Okay. Which side of the highway you live on?
East.
East side of the highway? Alright, then yeah, you're probably in District 2. I'm in District 1 in Aurora, which is most of Aurora that's on the west side of 225. There are, I think, 7 police districts in Denver, 3 in Aurora. But our police districts are one of our smallest sort of forms of police organization. And so if we can get a hold of them at that level, that's about as community driven as it can be. It's very localized. There's a big culture difference between this side of the highway and the other side of the highway in Aurora, honestly. Or even as you get more into the rural parts of Aurora out further east. What else? CPAC is all civilian. It cannot be cops. It cannot be the wives of cops or the uncles of cops. It has to be not cops. That's the whole point. And yeah, I don't think that really requires a lot of explanation. That's something that's been demanded forever. They have to have the power to hire and fire all officers, from the lowest beat cop all the way up to the chief of police. If you live in Aurora, you know there's a lot of controversy right now over how the chief of police is selected. If you live in Aurora, you get to vote for one of the people who appoints the person who appoints the chief of police. That's the democratic power we have over the chief of police. They did not ask a single member of the community anything before appointing this most recent chief of police, who I'd like everybody to know came from the LAPD. He was in the LAPD during the Rodney King riots. He's LAPD. There's a NARPR chapter in LA, and they'll tell you what their police have been like for the past several decades. LA has brutal repression, especially of their Chicano populations up there. So what else? CPACs have the power to discipline and subpoena officers. It doesn't matter if no chokeholds is a part of your policy, if there's no way to enforce no chokeholds when somebody does it, you know? And so we need to have civilian, because when the police do it, we've seen what happens, right? What happens when the police go in and investigate themselves?
Not by their own investigation.
We investigated ourselves and found we did nothing wrong.
Murder.
Yeah, exactly. No, this was totally in compliance with our policies. You see, there's this like really fine print here about how chokeholds are not legal except when you're really scared, you know? So yeah, you have to have the power to enforce these policies, but you also have the power to write the policies. We think civilians, the cops will have you believe that they're the only ones who could possibly understand how complicated their jobs are, and only they could possibly write their own policies, because what could we ever know as lowly people about policing, you know? But I think everybody in this room could probably agree that policing would be a lot better if we were the ones writing the policies, if our representatives were the ones writing the policies, if people in our neighborhood were doing it. How could it not be? This is a huge one. We need to have power over police budgets. Do you know how much of your city budget goes to the police? In Denver, it was almost 40% of the general fund went to the police last year, and it goes up every year. And that's it for Democrats in office, that's it for Republicans in office. Every year the police get more and more expensive. And then not only that, they get more and more expensive because people are suing them for their misconduct. During the George Floyd protests, they gassed so many children that they had to pay out like $20 million in settlements. That didn't come out of the police's budget, y'all. That came out of the general fund. That came out of your schools. That came out of your hospitals. That didn't come out of their budget. Didn't cost them a penny. Not even their jobs. So they also have to have that power to write policy and redraw police districts. Honestly, Aurora Police District 1 is huge. The fact that there's only 3 police districts in Aurora, and some of these people are being lumped together with like really wealthy, white, never had to worry about the police in their life neighborhoods, it's a shame. And I think if the people of Aurora really had a say in how their police districts were drawn, they wouldn't draw them the way that they're currently drawn. So that's also a really important power for us. Does anybody have any questions about any of this before I move on? Excellent. So, does this exist anywhere? The short answer to that is no. These are democratic powers that have never been won over the police yet. But what we have seen is that the places that are fighting for this have made much larger gains than anywhere else. They're able to unite larger groups together for a bigger cause. And that's because CPAC doesn't tell you what to do with your police. A lot of other slogans about police are telling you what to do with them, right? Abolish your police, disarm, defund, dismantle, retrain, hire more black and brown officers, right? These are all things that fundamentally you can't do unless you have control over your police. If you have no say in how policing occurs, it doesn't matter what you want done with the police. Even if everybody's totally united on abolish the police, right? One of the more extreme ones, abolish the police. If everybody was united on that, if we have no instruments of power over the police, it doesn't matter if we all agree on it. They're gonna keep doing what they're doing. So we fight for the instrument of power, and we don't care why you want that power. If you want to abolish the police, come fight for CPAC with us. If you want to retrain the police, come fight for CPAC with us. It'll help you do that. If you want to hire more black and brown officers, come fight for CPAC with us. It'll help you do that. That's our goal. So, how close have we gotten? The closest we've gotten is in Chicago. The Chicago Alliance, which I mentioned, was led by Frank Chapman. They've been fighting for ECPS the longest, but even then, in a very short amount of time, they have been able to radically change the way policing works in Chicago. And I'm going to invite my friend Brandon up here to talk a little bit more about what they have done there. Just know that it is not a CPAC unless it has all of these. And until we have all of these, we will continue fighting for CPAC. And that's true here, that's true in Chicago. But in Chicago, they made huge steps in this direction, and they jumped on the opportunity to get it, and then continue fighting from there. So let's hear from Brandon.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's important to note that like during the movement in 2020, there was a mass movement of widely different organizations that were pushing this forward. And I'm just going to talk about kind of what happened in Chicago and kind of what they're doing as like a model. And then also just like after that, just opening up for some discussion about what we're talking about and like how do you guys want to see police changed in your neighborhoods, and doing like a small group and talking about that more. Okay, so Chicago recently passed something called ECPS, Empowering Communities for Public Safety. That was passed in July of 2021, but it took a really long time to get there, and there was multiple different groups fighting for similar things. One of the organizations in Chicago was called GAPA, and still is called GAPA, but it's mostly groups of like nonprofits and different community organizations that were fighting for something similar to CPAC, but wasn't directly elected, and was appointed by different district councils and stuff. They had the support of over 24 aldermen in their community, but they needed 36 to pass their ordinance. So they were limited in that way. And then there was another kind of ordinance that was being pushed in Chicago called CPAC, which is kind of what we've been talking about. And it had a lot of grassroots support, having the support of like 12 different aldermen. And they wanted to get direct elections for kind of what they're talking about. And through there was a lot of, fighting over like these different organizations and what they wanted. But by coming together and actually fighting for a common cause, they were able to expand their coalition and expand their broad base of support. And were able to pass what is now called ECPS. One of the most important things that happened in Chicago was by getting unions involved in like the fight for against police brutality. The SEIU union in Chicago is one of the biggest supporters of them, turning out their local union members of over 200,000 people to directly support this cause. So getting unions to support movements in Colorado is going to be really instrumental to fighting for reform and for change in our communities. So yeah, that happened over the course of roughly like 7 years that people were fighting for this. It took a long time, and that fight was, as Ryan was talking about, was really led up by the Black Panthers a really long time ago. Yeah, so what do they actually have now? So this is kind of a graphic that someone called Garcia Schaefer Schonenberg put together. They're now part of the an elected person for the 19th District Council in Chicago. So basically, like what Chicago is able to do is pass ECPS. This essentially puts forth like two different boards or like bodies of people. One being called the Commission and one being called like the Police District Councils. So I'll start with the like district councils, but these district councils are made up of 3 elected people from each police district that are not cops, that are community members, and then they have they receive public input about policing in their community. They have monthly public meetings and collaborate on initiatives for like with other community groups. And in Chicago, they have 22 police districts. So they have 66 members on these different district councils that are putting forth policies and stuff. And a long debate that was happening in Chicago was like, you're never gonna get 66 people to run for elections. Through community organizing and like union leadership, they were able to get 122 people to run for those elections and actually like get people organized and have more conversations around it. So these district councils are directly elected by the people in their like surrounding local communities, and it allows it so if you have an issue with the police, you have someone 5 minutes away from you that you can go to and actually like start putting pressure on the police and implement some change. So these elected people nominate members of the commission, which is something that was passed for that part of it. And then, so the commission part of it, these are nominated by those district councils. They basically have the power to talk about and give suggestions for the budget of the police. So they make budget recommendations to city council. They also establish public safety goals, and they also have any chief selection process has to go through them. So whether they're retired or fired, they must go through a civilian body now. So that's a big change to like what we've seen in Aurora, right? Where it's city council appoints this city manager, that appoints the chief of police, which is so many steps far removed from any democratic process. And like being able to have control over that is a big step forward. And this is one of the things that could be improved with what happened in Chicago, right? Like having direct elections over the people in this commission. One of the limitations they had is, in order to do so, they had to change the state law in order to like pass a referendum or amend their constitution, which takes a lot more organizing work. So they were able to pass the city ordinance to do that. So this commission is made up of 7 members of a citywide body that shapes their policy, establishes goals, appoints the chief of police and stuff, and most importantly, they also have they're able to appoint and fire members of the COPA, which is basically the body that has like the investigation body of the city. So that's the body that investigates police misconduct. So now they're actually able to have directly elected people that are able to get rid of these or appoint these investigatory bodies. And they also have the power to appoint and like get these police boards, which is like the disciplinary body of the police. So they're able to get rid of or put people in charge of what these disciplinary bodies are doing that are not the police. So those are like some of the important things about what they were doing in Chicago, and that fight is still ongoing. Not all of those demands are won, but it is a big step forward to getting more democratic say in like how we're being policed and like how our communities are shaped. And yeah, the fight is still ongoing, and encourage people to look more into it about what NARPR is doing in Chicago. But with that, that's pretty much all I have for ECPS, kind of explaining what it does and how it functions now. If you guys want to learn more, I can send you the actual like legal like document of the ordinance that they passed. But yeah,
There's also a great episode of Fight Back Radio. Plug.
Yeah.
Fight Back Radio. If you like podcasts.
cool. All right, so kind of the next thing I wanted to do is just maybe like we break up into like 2 small groups, and we kind of talk about what we want to see in our communities. So maybe we like split it like down the middle, and we kind of just form 2 like circles. Does that sound good to everyone? Cool.
You wanna do this, gonna just stay right here?
Oh, here, let me, so our discussions can be,